In this video, we're going to get our body updated to where our head details is. So if you remember in the original series where we did the goblin, we started with the body and the head and we made those nice and detailed. And in that case, all you have to do is go into face tools and update the expression wrinkles and the face shapes and you're good to go. In this workflow, we started with face tools, which gave us a very highly detailed head and expression wrinkles and shapes. But now our body is kind of left behind in a suboptimal state. So we're going to get the body cut up, and the workflow we're going to use is the body workflow. So instead of going through here and saying, using the face tools button or going into plugins, face tools, and using the face tools button, we're going to send over a body file that's going to have the head connected to the body, but we're going to have to transfer the details from our head face tools shape to our body workflow. So I'm going to, again, we're in the body workflow now. So just like we did in the original series before this one, we're going to grab our top character node all the way down, shift down to the bottom. We're going to say GoZ. Make sure this is set to create. We're not going to split anything out. We're going to choose a pose. This is very important. We're going to hit GoZ. And that's going to send over, again, the body workflow is going to send over all the appropriate files for us to work on this body file. However, like I said, it doesn't know anything about our face tools file, which is open right here. So here's our body file with 7 subtools. Here's our face tools file with 9. And if you remember, our face tools file does have a body, but it's just kind of sitting there, kind of worthless. Our body file, our body workflow file, has the head in here with the body. However, it doesn't have any subdivision levels. So if I go down here to geometry, you're going to see no subdivision levels or very low polygon points. And then we have our base head here. So there's 2 things we need to do in order to transfer our head details to our body workflow. Number 1, we're going to need to control tap the latest point in history for this file. If you have a ton of undo history and it's really hard to select that, go in here to edit, delete older undo history, and then that'll just delete all your older undo history. And then again, just control tap that point in history. What that's doing is storing these vert positions and the vert color to a history. It's kind of just a history state. Those verts are just going to be available to us no matter what subtool we're working on. In fact, it can be a subtool in a completely different tool, which is what we're going to do. So we stored these vert positions and vert colors in space. We're going to go back to our body workflow file. And now you can see this head is attached to the body. However, we need more subdivisions so we can transfer those subdivisions over. So I'm going to make this one match our face tool file. So I'm going to hit divide, 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 divide. So now we're up to subdivision level 6 for this. That matches our face tools head. And we're going to use the morph brush. And in order for the morph brush to work, our vert order has to be the same. So if I go back here to this head, you're going to see, number 1, he doesn't have eyelashes. In fact, let's go in here to solo mode. So for the CC base skin head, all the detail I want to transfer over, I can't have the eyelashes showing and I can't have the body showing. Luckily, if I go back here to the base body here, they make it pretty easy for us. All we have to do is Control Shift tap the body, and those are a red polygroup. So that is your body, your nails, and your eyelashes. It'll all be isolated for you. Control Shift drag. And now the only points that are showing are the head verts and our tear duct verts, which matches perfectly with our face tools. So again, we control tap this point in history to store those vert positions. We have the same vert order. So now I'm going to go to our B to go to our brush menu, M to narrow it down to our morph, our brushes that start with M, and then G to select our morph brush. Now, the reason I'm doing a morph, and let's switch over to like green metallic, is because, number 1, we can have X symmetry turned on this brush, which is nice. We're not projecting. And because we're not projecting, it's actually going to be a lot cleaner. Whenever you get into, history projection or subtool projection, it's moving verts and snapping it to the nearest position. And that can lead to a lot of stray verts and a lot of kind of dirty areas. Morph is literally moving the verts from one position to another, much cleaner. So again, with our morph brush selected, we can turn off RGB, Z add, Z intensity up to 100, make that brush really big, just tap S on your keyboard and drag that to the right. And then just with a really big brush, you can go through here and just morph all those positions to match your detailed head sculpt. And it's already done. So now If I hold down Control Shift and tap, that's going to bring our other polygroups back, and you're going to see our detailed head is now attached to our body. One problem, we don't have our skin color. So let's go out of green metallic. We'll go back to Skin Shader 4. So again, we stored these positions in history, but it also has RGB information in those verts. That's our Polypaint or our vertex color. So if we go back to our body here, unfortunately, Morph brush doesn't work with Polypaint, but projection does. So now we stored those points in history. So I'm going to say project history, but we're going to turn off geometry. We don't want to touch our geometry, but it's safe to project our Polypaint. So actually, before I even do that, I'm going to go back to our head here, and I'm going to choose just like a neutral base skin color, tap C on our keyboard, and I'm going to go back to our body, and I'm going to say color fill object. That's going to fill all the verts of our body, and you'll see it turned on colorize for us with that kind of base skin tone color. So now if I go back up to white, it's not going to change because, again, colorize is turned on. So now if I go with this selected, I want to project my color back. So I'm going to go down here to project subtool, project history with color turned on, and that's going to project the color from my face tool's head to my body geometry. And there we go. Now, if you wanted to do that and not have it projected like the eyelashes and stuff, you can undo this. And again, we'll turn on our polyframe, Control Shift tap the body polygroups, which is going to include the eyelashes, Control Shift drag to invert that. And then with just these showing, you can go through here and say project history with color turned on. Now this one doesn't care about vert order. It's just projecting to the nearest vert. So you could hide the tear ducts or whatever if you wanted to. It doesn't care about having the same vert order. But we've transferred the color, Control Shift tap to bring everything else back. I'm going to turn off our colorize temporarily. I'm going to go back to like green metallic. I'm going to turn on X symmetry by tapping X on my keyboard. We'll drop down to subdivision level, like say 3. I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to smooth out this transition between the body and the neck here because it's a little distracting. And if you are having trouble smoothing, if you want, you can hold down Shift. Let's go into our brush menu. I'm going to drag that to the left. We're going to go down, again, holding down Shift, go into the smooth brush modifiers. Change your weighted smooth mode to 1. That's going to be smooth stronger. That way you can actually go up to like subdivision level 5. And when you hold down Shift to smooth, it'll smooth that out pretty well. If you're still having a hard time, just drop it down to a lower subdivision level. And then that'll just give you fewer verts to move around. And then you can go up 1. And then you can smooth these out. It's just a lot easier to smooth as you go up in subdivision level, especially if you have weighted smooth mode turned up to 1, which if you hover over this, you'll see that's smooth stronger. So we're smoothing this line out. Now we have a seamless integration from our high-res face tools head. We're at subdivision level 6. We have Polypaint here. We can switch back to our skin shader. We'll go out of solo mode. I'm going to save this file. We're going to do a file save as so we don't change any of these names. So file, save as. On our desktop, we're done with face tools now. We're going to say face tools body. We're going to GoZ all. And just to reiterate or be perfectly clear, when we're doing the body workflow and we're GoZing, all it's GoZing is that subdivision level 1 vert position. It's not baking any textures like face tools is or anything like that. If you want to know how to do that for the body workflow, I got a great series for you to watch. The Character Creator Pipeline Body. If you go in here and view this full playlist, this will walk you through how to create a custom body for your character, how to go into the Substance Painter workflow and bake your Substance Painter stuff, your Substance Painter details to your base body, how to create accessories and clothing and dynamic cloth and weight maps and saving the library assets and then even going in and doing facial animation. All of that stuff is in this playlist. And if you go to my ArtStation page, it's set to all by default. Here's the ZBrush, what's new if you want to get caught up in ZBrush. If you go to the Real Illusion Character Creator, here's all of my live streams and series that I've done with Real Illusion Character Creator, including this Face Tools one whenever I get done with this. So anyways, leave all this on update. That's totally fine. A-pose, hit update. And you'll see nothing really changed. And again, that's because we're just setting up a file for the body workflow. So now what I'm going to do is hop back into ZBrush. And in fact, if I want to sculpt on this nice neutral pose now that we have it, now that I have it in Character Creator and I'm relinked, I'm going to say, with all these selected, I'm going to GoZ back to ZBrush, but I'm going to do current pose, so I get that nice relaxed A pose. It's already set the relink, which is perfect. I'm going to say GoZ. There we go. Now he's in a nice relaxed A pose. I didn't lose any of my detail. I still have all of my subdivisions here. So now all I have to do is go and update his body with a nice, scraggly, vampire-y kind of base body. Now, we're not going to cover the sculpting process for the body or the head, as you've noticed, because, you know, this is a character creator tutorial series. It's not a sculpting series. However, I do have live streams, so go to my live stream full episodes playlist, and you can go through here. Here's the vampire anatomy body sculpt, and then here's the character creator face tools and ZBrush. The vampire body sculpt is going to go through and talk about the entire anatomy sculpting, basically the entire body creation, and how to get that from ZBrush to character creator and painter and back again. The head, the face tools one here, goes through the sculpting process of the, you know, details of the face and cavity masking and polypainting and stuff like that. All right, and we've got the body updated, all poly painted up and detailed out, and he's got, you know, vampire body to match his vampire head that we had. So now we need to make this recompatible with our character creator base, because remember, we made a bunch of changes. He's got his Kevin body still, and we haven't baked the normal map yet. All we're really sending back is just the subdivision level 1 geometry, so the basically the kind of emaciated body, and then we're going to have to go into Painter and use the previous workflow, the Goblin workflow that we showed in the previous series, to bake his body details off in Painter, which is pretty easy. But first, we're going to go ahead and sync these files back up. So with everything showing in here, we're going to send this back over. So we're going to say GoZ all. Everything is set to update. So we'll go ahead and hit update. There we go. We got that emaciated body, and now we just need to throw this into Painter. But before I do that, let's go ahead and save these two files. So we're going to go save file, save project as. We'll call this Face Tools Body 002. And I've already saved this file out, but we'll do it again. File, save as, and again, Face Tools Body 002.zproject. So now we have these two files synced up. And this is going to be the exact same workflow as the previous Goblin body workflow. And again, it's just a body workflow. So in order to go through and paint or bake off this character in Painter, what we're going to do is we're going to select the entire character. His name's still Kevin. We're going to go over here to the Motion tab. We're going to go to Edit Facial, and we're going to open the jaw so we don't get any normal errors when we bake the mouth area out, like when we bake the lips. So we're going to go in here to Modify, down here to Jaw Open. We'll set this to 50. Nice, easy number to remember. That way, if I accidentally leave my ZBrush file in a bad state, or I save the ZBrush file with his mouth open, I know I can always go back in here, open this mouth, relink, and then close it again if I need to. So anyway, long story short, Jaw Open at 50. We're going to GoZ this back. So again, I'm going to open all this up. We're going to send all of this body stuff back over to ZBrush. We're relinking. We're going to go ahead and do current pose. We'll GoZ. So we're setting up our low-res file in Character Creator to be compatible with our high-res geometry in ZBrush. Now, again, I do want to export my high-res geometry here. So of course, I need to select the base body subtool, go down here to geometry. Let's subdivide this up until we get to subdivision level 6. And I'm going to export these polygons to bake to. However, if you remember, if I go in here to solo mode, number one, well, let's not go into solo mode. Let's do this for real. I'm only going to export the base body. I'm not going to bake anything from the upper teeth or the tongue or any of the lower teeth. All of that kind of baking I'm going to do in Face Tools. If I want to do that type of work, it's going to be Face Tools work. This is literally just to bake the head and body normals back to the base, because remember, he has Kevin's colored skin and Kevin's muscular body normals. So we're going to replace those with this body workflow. So I'm going to hold down Shift, touch this eyeball. That's going to turn off visibility for all my subtools here. And then I'm going to go ahead and tap the nameplate to turn that eyeball back on. I'm going to zoom in a little bit because I'm going to hold down Control Shift. I'm going to Control Shift tap my eyelash polygroup here. If you don't have an eyelash polygroup, I probably went through and made these polygroups myself. One thing you can do is go into tap X to turn on X symmetry, zoom in here. Rotate your camera around so you just see these eyelashes. Hold down Control Shift, go in here to select lasso. Just grab a little piece of those eyelashes, do Control Shift A, and then Control Shift drag. That'll invert the visibility on those eyelashes. That way, we're just exporting the tear ducts and the base body, no eyelashes. We don't need to bake anything out from that geometry. So now that we only have our base body showing with no eyelashes, we're going to go in here to Tool, Export, and we're going to put this in a folder. Let's go ahead and put this on our desktop. We'll call this Vampire Bake. I'm going to switch this from OBJ to FBX, and we're going to call this Vampire Bake _hi. Doesn't really matter. I don't need to worry about namespaces or anything like that. We're just baking a base body to a low-res body. I can't, this window's stuck down on the bottom here, so I can't show it to you, but I can show you this. This is my FBX export options, visible, smooth normals, hit OK. That's all you need. So go ahead and say export OK. And that's going to export just what we have visible here, just this geometry. And again, this has our high-res details that we're going to bake to our normal map and our Polypaint that we can use as a base color for our skin as a starting point in Substance Painter. Now, while that's going, back here in Character Creator, I'm going to have Kevin's top node selected, or the main character node. We're going to go up here to Substance Painter, export characters to Substance Painter, and we're just going to put this on our desktop as inside of Vampire Bake. We'll call this Vampire Bake Low, and this is going to export an OBJ file. Again, if you've already gone through the body workflow for the Goblin, there's nothing new here. It's all the exact same thing. So again, this low res is going to have a mouth open, and then back in ZBrush, this high res is going to have a mouth open. Now, we are exporting 13.769 million points, so it is going to take a few minutes for this to export. Once that is exported, let's go ahead and open up Substance Painter. We'll go to File, New. We're going to select our OBJ. So again, under our desktop Vampire Bake, our Vampire Bake Low OBJ, we're going to use the UV tile workflow. We're going to make sure we preserve our UV tile layout per material. And we're going to be working at 2048. It's totally fine. And that's again for each UDIM. So we're going to hit OK. There we go. And if we go to our texture set list here, you'll see we have boxers and the eyebrows came in. We still have Kevin's eyebrows on his head. We have the brow base, cornea stuff, eye left, eye right. Again, all stuff we're not going to really play around with. And then here's our standard skin head, and then our tongue and our upper teeth. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and turn off everything except for our standard skin head here. And if you want to work on this texture set, you can Control-Alt right-click that texture, or his body, and that'll select the texture set, or you can go and choose it in this texture set list. Then underneath texture set settings with, you know, you don't have to have this selected, but we're going to bake to maps that we're going to use in this texture set here. Underneath texture set settings, we're going to scroll down until we see bake mesh maps. Go ahead and click that on. And just like in our texture set, here's our texture set list again, and we have a whole bunch of texture sets that we can bake to. Now, don't confuse us turning off those eyeballs with what Substance Painter is going to bake. That is these check boxes here. So I'm going to go through and uncheck boxers, brow, cornea. We're not baking anything except for the body. And in fact, we're only baking a few things, or you know, we're leaving a few things out of that body. So again, go and uncheck everything except for that standard skin head. You can leave that checked on. If you remember from the Goblin workflow, 1001 is the head, and then 2 is the chest, 3 I believe is arms, 4 is legs, 5 is nails, 6 is eyelashes. We're not going to bake to nails or eyelashes. You can if you want, but I'm not going to. So go ahead and leave those unchecked. Go in here to that little folder icon to grab and import your high res. Leave your output size at 2048. Common settings are pretty fine at their defaults here, but just go into your material ID and remember to switch your material color out for vertex color. That way, when we go through and bake, it's going to bake our Polypaint to a material ID map. Once it's done loading in your high res, we can go up here to common settings, and you can see you can change your max frontal distance and rear distance. That'll change your cage. I think everything will bake fine. It's, again, just because we have just the skin head and these body UV tiles, it's not going to bake the boxes or anything, so we're safe. So we're going to say bake selected textures, and that's going to bake our high-res body information to our low-res character creator information. So that Kevin normal map that's on there now is going to be replaced by this gaunt, kind of skinny vampire normal map. Here is our material ID, which is actually our Polypaint is being baked to a texture that we can use again as a base to kind of start with. Here's our curvature map that we can use. All the maps we can use to our advantage to flesh this character out with texturing in Substance Painter. Once that's done, we'll say return to painting mode. And as you can see, here is our body. I'm going to go over here to our layers. Again, if you want to, you can Control-Alt-Tap the body, or just make sure that you're in the standard skin head texture set list. And then we have a layer in here that we don't need. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. I'm not going to go into detail on texturing this body, but the basics are, I'm just going to make a fill layer. And with this fill layer, I'm going to right click this and add another fill layer. And in this fill layer, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to turn off, you can see we can narrow it down by like materials, smart materials, masks, textures, brushes, all that stuff. Go ahead and turn all of those off so I have access to everything. And I'm going to go in here and type in project. And this is going to be all my project files. And you're going to see these are the maps that were baked. If I hover over the color map, this is our material ID map. This was our Polypaint baked from our ZBrush vertex color. So you're also going to see it has the number 4 on it. That corresponds to the number of UDIMs that we baked out. So again, if I scroll and I open this up, again, we baked to tile 1001, 2, 3, and 4 right here. So that brought in 4 maps. So when I go through here with this fill, I want to fill this with my color. It's going to fill in the head, body, arms, and legs for this color map. So when I drag it in here, it's going to take all 4 of those textures and apply it. You can kind of see it popped in the head for just a second on the chest, and then it filled out the color information. So here's my base color. And the reason I made it a fill map, in fact, you can go to this top fill layer and just turn off all of these layer settings. We're not going to use them. Here, our fill layer, this is going to be kind of our base layer. So in fact, we can just name it that. We'll call it base skin. And now we have a fill with our color on it. And if we want to change that, we can right click this fill and go over here and say, you know, add a filter. And in this filter, we can do a hue saturation. We scroll down, there's an HSL. So if you want to like kind of hue shift this or drop the saturation down, you can. Now, I will warn you that because we've done what I would consider kind of a backwards workflow, we started with face tools, we got this really detailed head, we've already poly painted it and textured it, and now we're going back and doing the body, but any updates we make to this body have to be compatible with that face tools head. Now that doesn't mean we can't change this and then send it back to character creator and then go back through face tools and update the head that way, but all of that poly painting we did using face tools in ZBrush is going to be kind of baked in. So you're going to have to kind of redo some of that work if you make any drastic changes here. I'll leave that up to you. Now, if you are doing the regular workflow, which is like the Goblin workflow, body and head, and then go into face tools, you don't really have to worry as much about that because you've already made decisions on the body and head. Then when you go into face tools, you're just updating facial expressions and updating the teeth and eyes. So that workflow is probably a little bit better, but this is again, it's a backwards workflow, but it's totally doable. I just wanted to throw that out to you. Now, speaking of smart materials, I'm going to go ahead and X out of here to get rid of that project. I'm going to go to the smart materials section. I'm going to type in vampire, and I have a smart material that I made. Essentially, a smart material is just a collection of basically everything you're putting over here. You can group it together, right click that group and say make smart material. That's all I did. So if I drag this over here, that's going to auto texture this based on how I like to have it set up. So I'm going to go ahead and say get rid of this base skin. I'm just going to walk through how I created the skin really quickly. Nothing fancy, just saving me some time here. So I have everything under the vampire skin group. Again, you can just right click this and say create smart material if you want. If you want to get it out of that folder, you can just shift click through here and then just drag it above the folder and then just delete that folder out of here. So just starting from, well, let's go ahead and I'm going to turn off all these layers and we're just going to again start with that base skin here. In this case, that base skin is just our base color map filled in here, and I'll tell you why in just a second. The real skin texturing is this folder right here, and if I scroll down and turn these all off, we started with, again, our base color that was started with a fill map, which is our color, and then we did a little bit of levels on here, If you're going to do that, make sure this is set to base color. So when you go through here, and it looks like I didn't actually use the levels, but it's a good way to add some contrast if you need it. On top of there is an HSL perceptive, and in here I just did a little hue and saturation shift. So this is our base skin that I started with, again, from our material ID, quote unquote, / color map / Polypaint. On top of that, I did a cavity fill. So this fill layer here, I'm just going to step through this. This is our curvature map. So again, if we go in here and just type in project, if I hover over this, this is finding all of the edges and cavities that I can use. So I just drag that in as is as our base color. And then on top of that, go ahead and turn this on. So this is, and also this cavity here is set to subtract. So if I set this to normal, you'll see this is the effect it's having. When I go through here and set it to subtract, it's going to basically just add a little bit. It kind of makes it look like leathery and type of kind of mummy-ish. And on top of here, I also did a levels. Now again, make sure this levels is set to base color because that's what that is. On top of this, I did a gradient. So instead of, and again, let me just set this to normal so we can see what we're talking about. Here's our cavity map. Here's our levels. Here's our gradient. It's basically going through, and wherever your cavity map, again, it's basically just black, white, and then gray. Same thing in here. This was black, gray, and then white. I replaced the black with dark blue, replaced the gray with kind of a purplish tint, and then the white with kind of a pinkish tint. And then again, on the HSL, I just kind of made that a little bit green. And I'm not doing this in a vacuum. I'm essentially setting this to subtract, and then I'm kind of playing around with these settings. So I'm going over here and I'm saying more saturation, less saturation. You know, where do I want this hue to kind of fall in line? And that's giving me kind of a sickly yellow, leathery, mummy kind of a Brahm feel to his skin. So that's that cavity fill there. And then on here is a skin punch. So essentially, if I just turn this on, again, it's just a fill layer with everything turned off, except for, you know, this fill layer. Well, so this fill layer has everything turned off. And then the fill layer for this, again, it's just another curvature with another levels, another gradient. This time, the gradient is kind of a dark green with a lighter green and then a pink on top. And then over here, I'm kind of doing a hue shift to kind of like a little bit of, it looks like almost a desaturated. And this one is set to darken. So again, I'm going from this kind of look to kind of a dull, dead kind of look, just using my cavity maps. And all of that is going into a body skin folder. Now you'll notice the reason I have my untouched base skin as a fill layer down here is because I know that if I go through and have, so you also notice I have a mask over here. If I alt tap this mask, I masked out the head part of this and even kind of blended it into the body a little bit. And again, if I hit M on my keyboard to go back here, I basically don't want to touch the head because I've already done the Face Tools poly painting with that color map. So if I go through and make drastic changes to that base skin, and then he does a neck tighten or a brow wrinkle or a brow down or a brow up, it's going to keep that baked in Polypaint color for those expressions. So I don't want him to change skin tone when he does his expressions, right? So I kind of kept that all vanilla and then just dialed in the body. Again, it's kind of a backwards workflow, but you know, keeping the body compatible with the head is important in this workflow. Again, not to say you can't go back through Face Tools and fix it, but it's just extra work I'm not going to do. So that's why I have the entire body skin kind of dialed in, and then underneath that I have the base skin, and I just kind of leave that alone, and then just kind of put in my body skin underneath that head. You can see the body's a little bit greener, and I could go through and I could keep painting this out if I wanted to, just kind of brushing in a little bit. And in fact, you know what, while I'm thinking about it, maybe I'll do that. So again, I just right click this folder and said create a white mask, and then on here I'm just painting black. I'm going to right click, and this is just a normal brush, by the way. You can go in here, let's get rid of project. You can type in like dirt. I like to use like dirt 2 with a flow turned on, low flow, and then I can just kind of go through here and just lightly brush in a little bit of that kind of skin colored tone onto my body here. Again, because his back's looking a little bit too green. So I can kind of, again, his head is very skin toned, his body not so much, but I can go through and kind of reintroduce some of that skin tone, which is totally fine. Even on his forearm here, kind of a hard transition to his hand there. So there we go. Now he's a little more fully integrated. maybe his abs a little bit too. There we go. So we got his body skin here. We got his untouched head skin, basically. We do have some roughness in here. So if I switch this to the roughness so we can see what's going on. This roughness is literally just filled with the curvature map. So basically, where it's darker, it's going to be shinier. Where it's lighter, it's going to be rougher. This is just kind of getting some of his baked-in skin detail into that roughness map, essentially. And then on top of this roughness, we have a roughness breakup. Again, this is just a fill layer filled with, if I go in here to texture and say grunge leak, there's a leaky grunge in here. Let's find out exactly what, there we go, grunge leak large. And then I went in here and tiled it quite a bit. So I'm basically just putting like sweat leaks on him. And I can do levels in here. Again, this levels, make sure it's not set the base color because that's the default. Set it to roughness, and then you can go in here and you can dial in that contrast of those leaks. And this is being, you'll see the roughness breakup. If we switch from base color down here to roughness, you'll see this roughness breakup here is set to multiply. This roughness here with this cavity map is set to normal. So I'm multiplying these kind of sweaty, leaky areas over his cavity map roughness. So this is basically just his roughness. I'll go back to base color here, hit M on our keyboard, which basically just goes back to material. And there we go. That's his skin. That's his roughness. That's his base head still there. So I'm happy with this. Again, we've already done this workflow in the Goblin series, but we'll do it here. File, export textures. I'm going to turn off everything except for the standard skin head again. And even in the standard skin head, if I scroll down, I'm not going to bother exporting nails and eyelashes. I'm just exporting body stuff. So there's the 4 UDIMs I want to export. Back in global settings, I'm going to tell this where to go. We do have that folder on our desktop here. So when we're exporting these textures out, we want to overwrite what's in the Vampire Bake folder. And we have our Vampire Bake low. It's going to be weird, but while I'm in Painter and I'm exporting, I want to be a little at the shallow directory. I want to be looking at the folder that has all the folders in it, basically, when I'm exporting. Go ahead and say select folder. We're going to use our output template that is going to be the character creator template. Instructions on how to install this, but I'll talk about it briefly here. Basically, you're going to download this SPEXP file. You're going to put that into your username, Documents, Adobe, Substance 3D Painter, Assets, Export Presets folder. Just pop it right in there. And then when you go in here to your output template, this will be sitting in here. You can choose Character Creator. If you want to look at it, you can you can go to the Output Templates tab, click on Character Creator. This is what it's doing. You don't need to mess with anything in here. Just choose it. You can choose which file format you want. Doesn't really matter. I will mention, just like I did in the other workflow, if I go to my desktop Vampire Bake folder, Vampire Bake low, again, the standard skin head is where all my textures are going. It's just basically going to export textures and overwrite the ones in here and then update them into Character Creator. Some of these are set to PNG, like normal's PNG. This is JPEG. I'm just going to delete all of the ones I'm going to be replacing, basically. Nails and eyelashes I'm not going to touch, but head through legs, I'm going to select all those. Just select the head, shift select to the legs. Hit delete out of there. That'll delete all those textures, and that'll ensure that whatever I export will be updated in that folder. The texture size, I'm going to set to 2048. Everything else looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and say export, and that's going to populate. If I pull this folder back in, that just exported all these textures out, so now it's my vampire textures instead of Kevin's textures. We're going to say save settings. I'm going to go back into Character Creator. Here's our Kevin body with our vampire head. Let's change that. I'm going to go and select the CC base body in here because that's all we updated. I'm going to do Substance Painter, update textures from Substance Painter. We're going to go, this time what we're going to do is we're going to go to our desktop, Vampire Bake. We stopped here when we exported our textures. When we're importing textures, we're going to dive into this folder so that we see all the folders. Say select folder. That's going to go through and look through all the folders and grab the textures it needs and plug it into the materials here. And that's going to update these body textures. There we go. So now he has his creepy vampire body textures on here. And if we want to, we can make this scene a little more dramatic so it's not so well lit. Now, before I get into that, you can go to this Kevin top node here, go into material. There's a ton of material changes you can do in here. So for example, you can go in here to skin head. You can go in here and change like the roughness. You can keep your original roughness. There's a micro normal that you can go through here and change the strength on if you want. There's blend map changes you can do, basic overall texture changes. or bringing in texture. So there's a ton of material work you can do for every single aspect of this character. But I'm going to go in here to content. We're going to scroll all the way down until we get to stage, Lightroom. There's let's turn on authority. So I'm going to double click authority. That's going to update this scene here. So I'm going to go in here to scene. If you open up props and lights, you'll see all the things that make up this cool new Lightroom, basically. So let's go through here. Motion, we'll do a soft physics dance turn. So we're going to see his face update and his body. So we'll go ahead and say hit play. There we go. And if we want him to kind of be stuck in that spotlight, we can turn on this lock button right here. So now he'll kind of stay in place. Cool. And if I go in here to motion, wrinkle check, dramatic male, we'll hit play. And now you're going to see, again, as his neck flexes down here, that's why I was very careful about keeping this the same as our face tools color, because I knew if I changed the body color to affect the face as he's making these facial changes, it's going to blend into our previous Polypaint that we did. So that's the only thing I was careful of. And then you can see he's got his brand new body through here, and he's doing all his facial expressions and everything's blending in. You can see it's getting a little bit bright in here. But the good news is, now that I've done all this, I can go back through the Face Tools process and update those piecemeal. I can go in there and say, hey, I'm going to check on neck flex or whatever it's called, send that over, make updates, send it back, and I'm good to go. So feel free to update that. If you want to update these textures, it's as easy as going back into Substance Painter. Again, if I go in here to this body skin, and we just kind of, I'm going to do something real obvious here. I'm going to mess with this base color here. I'm going to just oversaturate it. Say File, Export Textures. Just hit Export. It's going to overwrite those files. We'll hop back into Character Creator, go in here and say Update Textures from Substance Painter. Dive in here so you see the folders. And there you go. Everything's been updated. So it's that easy to go back into Substance Painter and redo whatever you need to do. But like I mentioned, this is more of a kind of a backwards workflow. I don't want to say that because it's totally fine to do if you want to. You can see how to do that. But in the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow up. I'm going to go back to our Goblin series. So if you haven't watched that series, definitely check that one out. That's our body and head series. And then I can take what we did there and then run it through Face Tools. I'm going to go a lot faster because we already know Face Tools, but you'll see how easy it is to take the body and head character, throw it into Face Tools, make everything nice and bespoke and perfect for that character, send it back, and you're good to go. You've already done all the painter stuff, so at that point, it's just teeth and eyes and expression wrinkles at that point.